Thanks to AI4People for inviting me. I'm a computer scientist by training, and I tend to approach these questions from a socio-technical lens, much as David mentioned in his offering. And when I think of what it takes to build a trustworthy AI-enabled future, I think of three interacting elements: frames of reference, precise measurement and monitoring apparatus, and effective interventions. So let me elaborate. What is inescapable in any conversation about AI is what I'll call the discourse with a capital D. It's the constant onslaught of PR, messaging, politics, and commentary about AI, in which it's very hard to tell apart things that people want to believe to be true, like AGI or AI doom, things that are asserted as true to push a particular agenda, like questions about job replacement or AI doom, and assertions about AI that are ungrounded in scientific evidence, like, for example, that AI can reason, and of course, AI doom as well. And in fact, also sloppy conversations about AI based on confusion about specific tools. A chatbot is not a decision system, is not a robot, is not a therapist. And so the first part of building a future in which we can have trustworthy AI systems is having the right frames of conversation that consist of precise, accurate, and scientifically grounded statements about the technologies that we're using, a clear understanding of stakeholders and their agendas and how their agendas affect what they say about the technology, and the knowledge to differentiate between reality, aspirational thinking, and often, especially in the case of AI, what are often fever dreams, ungrounded in any kind of reality at all. A crucial way to combat this discourse is through a clear-eyed understanding of what different AI, kinds of AI tech can do for us, and even more importantly, what they cannot. This can only happen with measurements and evaluations, and they should be as precise and targeted, and I think other speakers have mentioned this as well, as precise and targeted of measurement and monitoring apparatus as we can make them. And one way to think about this that I found useful in my own thinking is about the dashboard of a car. What we don't have in a car is a single sensor that says car working, car not working. That would perhaps not be very useful to us. What we in fact have is a whole collection of sensors that tell us what the tire pressure is, how much gas or battery power we have, what the level of key fluids are and whether they are low. And these sensors are constantly running. They're active as we use the car. They're not just used in the car when it's being tested or in the factory. It's ongoing. And what we need is a measurement and monitoring infrastructure for AI systems so that we can make sure they are working and know when they aren't working. And I think as mentioned, as Joe Pearson mentioned earlier, this infrastructure has to be designed with us in mind, not just the testers within the companies making the systems. It has to be engaged with communities who are impacted by these tools. And the kinds of measurements and monitoring we need should be geared towards that. There's a third part of this picture, and it's about tools and interventions. So suppose we do have the right frameworks to talk about AI, and we have the right measurements in place to identify when systems are working and when they're not. But what do we do when there's a problem? We need interventions, ways to jump in and fix or mitigate or alleviate problems that come up, actual tools. Knowing that we can identify a problem and then fix it, I will argue, makes us more likely to trust that we can use a system. Can we identify systems that have biases in them and mitigate their effects? Can we identify when a tool is hallucinating and correct for that behavior? Can we identify, for example, as recently seen, when a chatbot is taking a teenager down a dark path and intervene before something terrible happens? Having concrete interventions acknowledges that our systems can and will fail and that we have ways to fix them. It puts pressure on product developers to incorporate these fixes into future generations of tools. It encourages policymakers to require the building of these interventions. And it builds a culture in which we don't just take performance on faith, but we ground it in testable engineering solutions. Trust has to be earned and established and not just demanded. If we want a future in which we trust AI systems, we need to have evidence-based and grounded conversations about AI. These have to be based on concrete measuring and monitoring frameworks that are ongoing. And they have to be accompanied by actions we can take to solve problems when they arise. Before I end, I just want to reflect a bit on what many of the other speakers have brought up. And I thought it's interesting that there's been a lot of discussion about where trust must reside. I think I just want to make the point that in what I'm presenting here, my argument is that I do not think trust resides in the technology or in the technology as an agent or as another entity. I believe that trust resides in our governance structure, in us, in the institutions we build. And that's where trust emerges from through a series of different checks and balances, just like the way, for example, Andreas mentioned this unity of values. So with that, I'll conclude. I'm looking forward to our discussion.